This is a Dynamics 365 podcast focusing on the ingredients of a successful Dynamics 365 practice. Your host is Business Solution MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as NZ365 Guy. Over the coming weeks, I'll be interviewing seasoned professionals from various parts of the world, talking about what it takes to be successful in a Dynamics 365 practice. For more information on this interview, show notes, feedback, and resources mentioned, or to suggest a guest for future episodes, please go to nz365guy.com/podcast. Thanks to Maplytics for sponsoring the Dynamics 365 Practice Podcast. iNorgic is a leading Microsoft Gold Dynamics CRM ISV, delivering best-in-class Dynamics 365 solutions through unparalleled offerings of service and add-ons. Its flagship products, Maplytics, is a market-leading certified for Microsoft Dynamics 365 geoanalytical mapping app that empowers users with powerful map visualization and routing capabilities to drive better sales, improve business processes, and engage right customer at the right time. Hi everyone, I'm here with John Gravely, and in this episode we're going to be focusing on the ISV and Dynamics 365. John is a technology entrepreneur and investor. Started, built, and sold two software companies, Click Dimensions and C360 Solutions. He also worked for Scribe Software back in the day. I'm excited about this episode with John as he has shown consistent success in the ISV space. Hi John, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Mark. Good to be talking with you again.
Yes. So things have changed a lot for you over the last year or so, I suppose, with selling up Click Dimensions.
Yeah, it's been great. We sold the business in May of 2016, and I stayed on until January of 2017.
So tell me, what have you been doing since?
Well, I've been doing a lot of traveling like you. Nice. I know you and your wife have been traveling the world, and I've been just really getting out there and traveling. I've got a lot of hobbies that I'm into these days. So I've been doing a lot of biking. I've been doing a lot of scuba diving and spearfishing, and
nice.
Playing a little bit of golf and just seeing some new places. Just having fun. Just having some time that I've never really had in the past. I never took any time off to do anything. Yeah. Like what you're doing. So it's been great.
So what's your number one recommended destination out of the places you've been outside the US?
I have to say, where you're about to go, Iceland, I thought was just an amazing country. It's so beautiful. Wow. It's so travel friendly. It's just the people are nice. The vistas are incredible. It's just a wonderful place. I did just get back from Cuba though, and Cuba is it's like getting in a time machine and going back to the 50s. That's super cool too. And there's obviously a lot of good places. If you're a backpacker, a lot of good places in the U.S. and Utah and Arizona, but yeah, I think right now I'm pretty high on Iceland. Nice.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Cuba. It's on my list to do early next year, kind of before MVP Summit. I'm planning on getting there because it's got two passions of mine: cigars and rum.
Cigars and what?
Rum, drinking rum, Cuban rum.
Yeah. Well, you'll have no problem doing both of those things. I have a big old humidor of Cuban cigars sitting right here. I can look at it. So if you come to my house, you can have one.
Brilliant.
I'll tell you what you won't have is use of your credit cards and your internet for the most part. You really go off the grid there. It's just the way it is.
Okay. Good to know. I won't schedule any podcasts to record while I'm there.
Don't.
So the other thing you mentioned then is scuba diving, and I just did my open water scuba as part of the year off, Meg and I. And so tell me about some of the dive sites you've been to around the world.
Oh man, I've been to Hawaii, I've been to Belize, I've been to Aruba. I dived the continental plates in Iceland.
Wow.
I've been, all over, but what I'm doing now is I have a group of friends down. I have a house in Florida, and I have a group of friends that we go 20, 30 miles out in the Gulf of Mexico, and we dive down and we hunt. We have spear guns.
Wow, fantastic.
We shoot grouper and, cobia and stuff like that. And it's a rush because you got sharks around you that once you get a distressed fish, they want they get interested in you. It's a blast.
Wow.
It's a rush. You gotta come down to Florida and do this with me.
Yes. Sounds
it'll
like
test
fun.
you.
Sounds like fun. So can you tell us a bit about your career with Dynamics, including your time at C360 and Click Dimensions? How did you get to starting two companies ultimately, and what was the journey you went on?
Well, yeah, I mean, the first thing I'll say is that, because I think there'll be some entrepreneurs and people running companies listening, is that I'm sort of patently unemployable. I just have never enjoyed working for people, and I just so early on I knew I had to go my own way and get to my own financial security without relying on a company.
Yeah.
And though it's weird the way it unfolded, after I got out of international business school, I did an international MBA. I went to work for a company called DataStream, and DataStream is where, Scott Millwood and the customer effective guys were born out of. And DataStream was one of the early users of a CRM package called Onyx. And I got really interested in Onyx CRM, and I went and worked for them. They were SQL Server based out of Seattle. And they had an opportunity, I'm told, at one point to sell to Microsoft and didn't take it. And so when they didn't take it, and I knew Microsoft was building their own CRM on .NET, I just thought, man, I got to get ground floor on that.
Yeah.
So I quit my job with a fellow I was working with named Jeremy Disatel, who ended up being the technical co-founder of Core Motives, which we can get to that later. But we started a company really to implement Dynamics CRM, but as you know, in the early days, it was pretty much an unusable product.
Yeah.
So we ended up building these add-ons for it, and it was good business. People needed them, but it was just a lot of revision, because every version, add-ons would get they'd get eaten up by Microsoft, and we had to build new add-ons. And it was just kind of like, you had to run a marathon every time you finish running a marathon. So, that sort of indoctrinated me into, some of the opportunity that can go along with building on Dynamics, and also just some of the, challenges that you can have. After I ended with C360, I sold it. We had a good exit, and I ended up going up to Scribe and running marketing for Scribe software for about a year and a half. I actually moved from Atlanta to New Hampshire and ran marketing for Scribe, and had a great time doing that. But part of that, I was implementing Pardot, which is a marketing automation solution. And so I really got into it. And C360 had previously been selling an email product called Green4, which you may or may not remember. And I was the main user of Green4. So I had these influences of Pardot and Green4. And that sort of led to the creation of really both companies, Core Motives and Click Dimensions.
Wow.
That ended up being, competitors, as you might remember.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about them a bit later on, and how you ultimately seem to win over most of your competitors in that space with Click, which is very good. So of all the choices you had for creating ISV solutions on Dynamics, what made you target marketing and Click Dimensions? Was it because of that experience with Pardot and that you saw that marketing was on the weak side in the original Dynamics product suite, and is that why you targeted?
Yeah, definitely. Plus, running marketing at Scribe, one of the first things, I did was look into marketing automation. So I got demos from Marketo and Pardot and Eloqua and all the players at the time. And it became kind of obvious that, this was going to be the next sort of thing, past CRM. And, your question, I think you used the vernacular, you said, of all the choices. I didn't really necessarily see it as that many choices. I mean, if you think about it, we've been building all these add-ons, which were just really, if we're honest, they were just features that Microsoft just hadn't gotten to yet.
Correct. Yep.
In C360. So, I wanted something a bit meatier, and I wanted something in marketing, because that was kind of my thing with C360. I was the marketing guy. And so, what better to build than a marketing solution? So that's kind of how that happened.
So how'd you come up with the company name, Click Dimensions?
As you know, when you go to look for a URL, there's like 3
so
left.
True. Yeah.
And, a lot of the technology had to do with tracking people on the web and, who clicked where, who did what. And, I originally wanted Click Dynamics because of the play on words with Dynamics.
Yeah.
And, you search a billion things, and ultimately I got Click Dimensions, which I thought was cool because it was, the clicking and the dimensions, meaning measurements, so the measurement of the clicking, and which was cool because I designed a little logo which exists today, which is a pie chart with a clicking arrow, a mouse arrow in it. Yeah. So it represents clicking and dimensions. So it kind of worked out, a little longer than I wanted, but it worked.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I bet there's a few people that will be listening to this that, would have found that interesting where it came from. So I'd like to understand what you see as the role of the ISV in the Dynamics ecosystem. And I suppose in a way it's changed considerably over the time that you've been doing this, and perhaps so a look back and a look forward.
Yeah. Well, so let's look back then. If you remember back in the very beginning, there was David Thatcher as the general manager of Dynamics CRM. And David was a guy that just, he was, if you ever met with him, he's just a cool guy. You could sit down and talk with him about the roadmap. You could be sort of honest about what you were doing. He would tell you, where he was and wasn't going to go. And I had, sort of that relationship with him. And then through the years also had to varying degrees relationships like that with, say, for example, Bill Patterson, who I've always, had a relationship with. And then you had, the Brad Wilson era, and Brad's a great guy, but we didn't necessarily have, as much communication. And then you got to the Stutz era, and it was just like you didn't even hear from anybody. So, not a diss on Stutz. It's a fact. For 3 years, I think I had 2 conversations, one at the very beginning and one at the end. And so, I think the ISV is, unless they're vertical, unless they're really, bringing customers to Microsoft. So let's say you have some sort of, let's just make an example. You have a software for pet stores and it's on Linux or something like that. You've got 4,000 customers. You're going to port it over to Dynamics CRM.
Correct.
You'll get some attention. People will like you, be at Microsoft, because you're going to bring potentially 4,000 customers. If you're seen as maybe drafting behind Microsoft and selling to their customers, even though you're adding a ton of value, even though you're making this customer stickier, even though, you're helping to close deals and compete against Salesforce, you just never get, the same kind of legitimacy or credibility. You just don't. So, I think if you're vertical and you're bringing customers, that's great. If you're vertical and you're in one of the verticals that Microsoft's really behind, that's great. You'll get some support. If you're horizontal, talk to Resco, talk to, me, talk to, probably others, that are really horizontal. You'll hear that they don't get a ton of attention.
Yeah, interesting. Because I remember when I was talking to, the people that were looking at purchasing Click Dimensions, I think sometime over a year ago now, and they were saying how important was Click Dimensions in the selling of Dynamics, and I was saying, particularly in a Salesforce automation scenario, we wouldn't have implemented Dynamics without putting Click Dimensions in it. It was kind of like they came as almost a package deal. It was so intrinsic, the ISV solution, if you like, to selling the actual, making the solution sell for the customer. So it's interesting because it was definitely, required to compete heavily against Salesforce. You needed that marketing component.
You absolutely did. I mean, Salesforce had acquired Pardot, which was a smart move on there. I mean, they acquired it via ExactTarget, which is a smart move on their behalf. Mm-hmm. But if you think about, when was it? A summer ago, I think at the Worldwide Partner Conference, when AppSource was launched. Yep. By far and away, Click Dimensions was the app on AppSource, regardless of whether it was CRM or one of the ERP platforms.
Correct. Yep.
And the whole putting together of that, the presentation of that, we weren't mentioned.
Yeah.
If you remember being there, it was all about like this, next best action from Vera Park or something like that, which is probably a fine product. But I mean, come on, nobody was using that at the time. It's like, it becomes sort of a joke. I mean, you get such great support from the field people at Microsoft and the partners who we always loved that, knew what it took to sell a deal. But then, you go up the chain and it's just, crickets.
Yeah. So do you think it was just, if you like, the leadership at that time? Because, from kind of being close to it to some degree, I definitely saw that the MVP community were, going, come on, what are we doing? What are you doing regarding Click? Because it was such a sound product. And obviously they went down the marketing pilot route there for a while. And so do you think it was just purely a leadership thing that you weren't getting that engagement that you particularly saw in the early days with the likes of David Thatcher, that type of thing, or what?
Well, yeah, I think that what happened is when they bought Marketing Pilot, that was their thing, and even though it was the wrong product, that was their thing. And so after that failed, you would have thought that, they'd have taken another look at Click Dimensions, but it turns out, from everything I hear, it turns out, that what they're doing is building their own marketing app. And now that there's no business and enterprise edition, that marketing app can go all the way up to Adobe. So I think it creates a huge, future competition for Click.
Yeah, definitely. But it's interesting, and I'll get onto this later. In that, when we look at your competitors and how they fell by the wayside over time, and if you like, Microsoft to a degree going after Marketing Pilot like it did, my perception is it actually just built on your value with Click because your product worked, it was consistent, and it just, I think you had good training programs around on training people on using it, and people loved it.
Yeah, I mean, we had we were doing all the right things. But, and Marketing Pilot was doing all the wrong things. So it definitely fueled our business. I mean, at the time it happened, I was just thinking, oh my God, what is this? Because there was no communication. It was weird. It's like I was going to Seattle for a conference, and at the minute the plane landed, I was there with Brad Burks, and my phone had a message, and it was some dude from Microsoft that I'd never met before, just sort of casually telling me that, my business is going to be impacted. And it's like, the guy had no concept of what it's like to build a business or do the things you have to do. And he's just making somebody told him to make a phone call.
Wow.
So, hey, call Gravely and tell his business is dead.
Wow.
It caused a lot of stress. And in hindsight, man, I have ISVs that call me now and they're concerned about things. And I just sort of say, hey, you never know how things are going to turn out. Just, remain calm.
Yeah. You've definitely shown that. So what do you see as the opportunity for the ISV with Dynamics now? We've got AppSource. There's been a bunch of products, as you say, that have gone horizontal, and then, Microsoft built it into the core platform. But what are the opportunities out there for ISVs now?
I think the opportunities, where you'll get the traction is if you're doing something vertical.
Yep.
I'm advising with one vertical ISV right now who I think has a real good possibility, to grow in the future. And if you're vertical in a vertical that Microsoft cares about, you really don't have to worry too much and look too much over your shoulder because, I really don't think Microsoft's getting in the vertical business. It's just too much for them to do. If you're horizontal, you just have to know that, you could be targeted just like CWR Mobility and Resco and Click Dimensions and, C360 and then I think an ISV has to take into account, you always hear that, what is it, that Stephen Covey phrase, begin with the end in mind. Yeah. What's your exit going to be? Do you want to sell the business? Of course, everybody does, even though some people say they don't, or, you might have a good exit in just running a really profitable business. But I can tell you, I'm an encyclopedia of exits for Microsoft Dynamics CRM. I know every one of them. I know what they went for. And, there's, and please correct me if I'm wrong, to my knowledge, ADX Studio is the only native app that ever exited to Microsoft.
Yeah. So the other one I was thinking of is the whole field service where it's come from, but it was using ADXs for the portals. It was using, a company out of Germany for some of the automation, and then it was using, of course, the mobility. Was third party as well. So, but I think there was one company, and I forget, it was an American company that had kind of strung the pits all together, which made that field service or project service automation as we know it now.
You might be thinking of Field One.
Yeah, Field One. Yeah.
Yeah, and but Field One was a freestanding, platform. It wasn't dependent on Dynamics CRM. And that exit was because some big customer really needed it. They needed it for a big deal. I mean, this is all, hearing from bankers and whatnot. There can be some facts out of place. But what I understand is that Microsoft had this monster deal. The deal wanted field service. Microsoft brought in Field One because it fit. And then the customer said, we're not comfortable with this small company. If you owned it, we would, we'd go for it. And so they bought it, and that was a Stutz deal.
Yep.
But that was something, that I don't see as a true native app that got, it wasn't like a CWR Mobility or a Resco or a Click Dimension. They got bought in.
Yeah, it's interesting that Resco has totally pivoted, I feel, to the Salesforce platform as well. And I just wonder if they see it will never be, and what I can see, a target for Microsoft to acquire.
I would definitely say that's probably the case. I've had so many conversations with Ivan Stano. He's a smart dude.
Yeah.
I love their attitude. If you remember Berlin in February of 2012, when the Extreme Conference was there, Microsoft got on stage with CWR Mobility and, and announced that deal. And, that deal obviously unraveled. CWR ended up, and ended up not selling to anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And 10 Digits, who was the other mobile vendor, actually left the show.
Yeah. I've forgotten clean all about them. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just remember the shock, because it wasn't a buyout at all. It was a partnership type thing, and then it just really never glued.
It was a partnership, but my understanding is that they had an offer from Microsoft, and without going into any more details, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big regret for the folks involved in that. But, Resco stuck through that. Resco, they're solid guys, but they would say the same thing that I'm saying, that, just when you're horizontal ISV, you're going to be targeted.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not like targeted as like it's negative or malicious or anything. It's just Microsoft has a right to build their own IP. We're all, big boys, we're grown ups. We understand that. It's just the key is to, how do you get out and make money, and, hopefully I time that right.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you see as the building blocks to becoming successful as an ISV?
Well, partners. Maybe not so much if you're horizontal and you've got a complex solution that partners can't deliver. I've seen that fail. But if you're vertical and you have a complex solution, but if it's anything that has mass appeal, if it's anything horizontal, the partners are the key. The partners are so great. I can't, I just thank those guys, and you included, of course, Mark, every day for everything they did for both my companies. But, if you pay them, if you treat them right, if you support them with sales and you stand behind the product, that's the gift that keeps on giving. It's just a great, it's a great leverage to have. You get a good team like we had of people to work with the partners. We called them partner account managers, people like, of course, Brad and Megan and Chantel and Jesse and Lisa and, just all these great people.
Yeah.
Then the partners will keep giving. The other thing that to be successful as an ISV is, and this goes without saying, but you have to have a solution that has some meat on the bones, that has some, undeniable value. I've seen a lot of, not a lot, but I've seen companies come out with, try to build a business off, a sort of nice to have, add-on or product, and they have a tough time, because you really need something that's compelling,
Yeah.
And partners aren't just partners are too busy to sell things that don't move the needle.
Yep.
In some way. And it's really not as so much about margin for the partners as it is about, does this help me close deals? Does this help me beat Salesforce?
Exactly.
All that. And, needless to say, I think, you just got to have the right people in your team. We just had such a great group of folks, many of whom came from C360 to Click Dimensions. We just, we were able to spin up quickly and make stuff happen. And it's all about the people. It sounds super cliche, but it really is all about the people. And the people we had are what made us successful. That's for sure in both companies.
Brilliant. So you covered 3 building blocks there. You covered the people or the team that you assembled around you. You covered the effect that the partner ecosystem had in engaging with you. And then the third one was that you had a rock solid product that worked. Yeah. So what else? What were the other building blocks that really, and I'm probably referring to how you went to market and as into marketing your technology. What were the other building blocks there that you think that an ISV really needs to consider seriously if they're going to launch a successful ISV business?
Well, yeah. So, you obviously have to have the right level of relationship with Microsoft.
Yeah.
And as I've alluded to, if you're a horizontal ISV, it's probably not going to be at a strategic level with Microsoft. But, as the people that really make the machine move, the technical specialists, the solution sales professionals, the PAMs, you get the relationship with those folks and they really introduce you to the right partners. They're helping put your solution in demos and things like that.
Exactly.
That's super, super powerful. So you may not be getting a call from Satya, but if you got the field and you're, working with you and you're working with them and helping them and adding value, then you get a lot out of that. So I think that's another really important pillar. And then, we did all the stuff in marketing that I think is, we just tried to stay on the front edge. And, when content marketing became big, we tried to be at the forefront with the blog and the ebooks and things like that, just to keep it in front of everybody, keep it in front of Microsoft, keep it in front of partners, keep it in front of, the competitors' customers. And we wanted to be there. If anybody said marketing with Microsoft CRM, we wanted to just pop up, whether it's, an ebook offer or a retargeting ad or whatever. So we played those channels really, really heavily. Just did digital marketing and the live event marketing, going to every event, Extreme and, CRM UG and, obviously the Microsoft events, which have changed over time, but, we just hit them all.
Yeah. Brilliant. It's one thing I noticed that, I think I met you first in Queensland. I don't know how long ago it would have been, where you were doing probably your first Click Dimensions event in Australia, and I'd traveled up from New Zealand at the time for that Microsoft Partner Conference. And one thing that I felt from a marketing perspective, that if I went to your website, I was remarketed to, which is, a function of Google and their ad platform, consistently from that point on, where I never saw any other ISV or Microsoft for that matter have that consistent making sure that you had mind share and when in people's browsers across the social platforms as well as the web, and that I feel like that real consistency in marketing. I see people do a one-off piece of marketing and think it's going to change the world, but I think as you continue to grow successfully, you continue to have those marketing fundamentals happening.
Yeah, definitely. The tools that were there at the time, which only get more sophisticated, as the technology grows, but just people didn't know about them. I remember at that Berlin conference giving a presentation. And, giving a presentation and showing, an example of a guy that'd been looking at our products and then he got retargeted to when he was looking at something totally different. Back then you could actually see the keywords he was looking at and, and he was like trying to find a zoo to take his kids to or something like that. And then all of a sudden Click pops up and he comes back on our site. And I was able to show the whole loop of how this guy came back in, I bought a freaking electric mountain bike the other day because I had been looking at them and thinking about them, and I'd rented one in Scotland, and I loved the damn thing. And I was somewhere completely else on the web, and the bike I wanted popped up, and I was like, screw it, I'm buying it.
Exactly.
So this stuff works, and it's super cheap. It was not expensive to do because it's all done based on the clicks rather the impressions, or at least at the time it was. It may have changed, but there are a lot of tools like that we were just really tenacious about using. Probably annoyed a lot of people too, though.
Yeah, I think, I know what you're alluding to and stuff, but I think there's an element that some people just don't understand how the internet works, as in how particularly Google's ad platform, Bing's ad platforms, etc., function, and that how, targeted remarketing works. It's almost like, some people thought you were specifically sending them messages when it was purely based on, their touch points online in some form.
Yeah, definitely.
So tell me, you've alluded to, how much partners played in growing your success, but, I've been to that many events that you really systematically engage your partners. You looked after them. Tell us a bit about why that's so important, and if there's anything you can share about how you strategize that and really worked with partners to make them successful and therefore growing your own success.
Well, some elements of it are just real basic common sense. If you get the partners, if you get them using your product, whether you give it to them for free or you give them a really discounted, use of it, that just makes sense. I mean, if a salesperson, a marketing person are sitting in front of Dynamics CRM using click dimensions, I mean, what do you think they're going to recommend, to their customers, assuming it works well and they get the support and service they need. So that's number one. Number two, I mean, I don't know that these are in any particular order, but you need to pay a decent margin.
Yep.
And one of the things that we did that I don't think we had to do, and for all I know has been changed since I left, I don't know for sure if it has, but we paid a margin that was, I think, pretty significant, but we paid it every year.
Yeah.
We didn't taper it off. So,
exactly.
these partners were building a snowball, an annuity for themselves.
Exactly.
And it worked. And were we potentially leaving money on the table? Maybe, but these guys made us, let's pay them, and by pay them on time. And we had the competitor, we always heard, never pay their margins on time or just screwed around and tried to cut margins or, people don't like that. I mean, they sold your product, treat them right, So, having the partners use the product, having, the margin structure in place, and then having just a great team, Brad and Megan and Chantel and Jesse and Lisa Patrick and all these great people, that were out there, working with the partners and making sure they had demo air cover and making sure that, they just really knew everything they needed to know in terms of how to communicate with the company. That all was part of the special sauce. I mean, I think the partners really felt like, and hopefully still do feel like that, they can get the support they need, or can get the support they needed from us. And so, we cared about them. We just did. I still do care about them. I think all you guys, helped me get to where I'm at, and it's a great thing.
Yeah. So you had the good payment system in place. You onboarded the partners and had a really good support team. The last manager I was working with was Chantel, and just absolutely fantastic, consistent communication, always answered in a timely manner, had consistent rhythms of engagement with us. But you also did a couple other things, like you had the information booklets and how do you do marketing, that type of thing that, could be connected to landing pages and used as an attraction. You also had the consistent training. It wasn't once-off training. You had your online training so people could continue to get skilled. How did that all come about? How did you put the framework in place? Which came first? Which came second? That provided all those great resources to partners.
Well, the first thing was the content marketing. Just in the beginning, I just was blogging incessantly, and just trying to be the place where people came to get educated about marketing, to help further the business. But I was just geeking out on it. I was really into it and learning about, what the new things were. And, I was having fun, helping others learn, and then assembling that content into, we used to do the annual book of ideas, the ideas ebook, which is really a compilation of the blog posts for the year. And that was just such a, highly download. I mean, tens of thousands of downloads on those pieces of content. And we did other, tons of other ebooks, and eventually through our marketing director, Heather, ended up having just a dedicated content person that, did that. So at the end, I wasn't really even writing that much, but so the content sort of came to drive the sales and marketing of the company. And then really when Matt came on, Matt Whitteman, who's one of your fellow MVPs, a lot of that, education and initiatives started to kick up. And then, with Alex on board and, others, we really got to where there were just these great trainings that people could go to, and, in person. And then of course the online trainings and Click Dimensions Academy and all that sort of stuff came into play. With any product, you want to be sticky. You want people to use you. We had an account management group run by Kim who, did a lot of analysis on, why people would leave Click Dimensions when they did leave. And, we had a really strong retention. But one of the things she found out is that people left because they weren't using the app. We had such good sales. People would buy it. They intended to use it. They were excited about using it, but they got busy. They had stuff to do. And to use Click Dimensions, you have to come up with content to push out. And so it's not like it just, does everything without you doing anything. So, seeing that data, we knew that we could reduce the number of customers that left because they weren't using by training them and showing the benefits of how to use it. So a lot of that was symbiotic between Kim and Matt and Alex, and of course Brad, who ran the sales team, and just sort of realizing that, we can't do anything about a customer that leaves because they go to Salesforce, but we can do something about a customer that leaves because they just never got around to using the product and it became shelfware. And that really drastically reduced, once the problem was identified.
Brilliant. Would you do anything differently in the way you set up your partner engagement in hindsight from the beginning? Just really, suppose looking for, hey, I wish we'd kick that off differently or something like that. Anything that jumps to mind?
I thought about that, and I really have trouble coming up with what that would be. I mean, there are definitely things that I think we could do in hindsight, like we didn't necessarily have to pay the year-over-year margin. We probably could have tapered it down and put more money in our pockets after year 3. But, I still like, given that we had, some tough competition in the beginning, I still like that we did that. It just felt right, and maybe we left some money on the table, but, who cares? I think it was a good thing to do, but I can't really, I think our team, led by Brad, and then all of the folks that, Chantel and Megan and Lisa and all those folks. I mean, I just think they're just good people that just knew how to treat partners right. And just, we just had a culture of just always wanting to take the high road and do the right thing. And, just, end up with great relationships with partners. So I feel like we did well there. There's always something you can improve, but I think that the fundamental pieces were there.
Yeah, no, I find that really interesting in that, some people think they could have done something different, but for you to have, I know I sent you this question in advance, and to put the thought in and feel you've really, you've seen the outcomes of it and you executed well. I think that's fantastic. Tell me, what part did Microsoft play in your business in the earlier days?
Well, like I kind of mentioned, like in the early days, I could go sit with David Thatcher and I could tell him what I was building and what I was thinking about. And, at one point, if you remember back to, and this is back to C360 days, of course, but I kind of see it as really the same company in a way. But, there were times when he said, John, we were thinking about building an activity roll up, but since you had done it, and the problem was solved, we moved to other things, that was cool. That was really cool. He could have really, hurt us by taking that product away in those early days, but he was communicative about that, and I think really after that at the corporate level, there wasn't a ton of communication. Not that there was anything negative, there just wasn't as much communication after that. And just everything came down to the field level, just really, knowing like I said, the technical specialists, the solution sales professionals, the PAMs, the various folks that were really out there interacting with customers seemed to be more valuable than, constantly trying to, fly out to Redmond and get the uppers to think about you, because they just, especially with Click Dimensions. I mean, once Stutz came in and bought Marketing Pilot, there just was no communication, and that's fair. He had a different direction and that was his right to do that. But, he certainly wasn't going to talk to us until really, just the whole time.
Yeah. No, interesting. Tell me about events and what part they played in your success and how you executed. And I'm thinking events from the various Microsoft events you attended, but you also, would throw some pretty good parties as well. They're central to a lot of these conferences and things. What part did they play in, I suppose, engaging with new customers and things like convergence in the past and your success?
And, one of the problems that might surprise people that listen to this is you actually have, if you're successful as an ISV in the way that we were, you actually kind of have trouble spending enough in marketing. You kind of want to spend more money in marketing than you're spending, because if you really net it out, there's only, I don't know the exact number, 10 or 12 events that are specific to Dynamics CRM on an annual basis. So, you have, going back a few years, you had Convergence, you had Worldwide Partner Conference, you had Extreme in the US and Extreme in Europe. And then you had the Dynamic Communities events, and every once in a while there would be a Convergence in Europe or whatever. And so if any of those events that were specific to Dynamics and to CRM, we were there. And, if the critical mass was there and the logistics worked out, we wanted to have an event, mainly to target partners, because you get a lot more ROI throwing a party for Mark Smith than you do for a customer.
Totally.
Because Mark Smith represents 20, 30 customers or 50 or whatever, So the events were huge, and, it became a point where you just thought, man, I wish there were more events we could do, because rather than flying to New Zealand to hang out with you, which was always fun, we can go to one place and there's 100 partners there. That's just makes good sense.
Yeah, exactly.
So we were limited in the number we could do. So when we did one, why not spend an extra $5,000 and throw a nice party? I mean, just kind of a no-brainer at that point.
Yeah. Brilliant. Can you tell me a bit about the competition from other companies back in the day? You had a few competitors out there, including Marketing Pilot, but there are also others in market. And from my view, they seem to have all disappeared over time. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so you had two types of competitors. You had Core Motives, which was the other native solution.
Correct.
And then you had the non-native solutions like Marketo and Pardot and Eloqua to a lesser extent. The non-native solutions never made a dent, and they never made a dent because they never understood the channel, and they never committed to the channel. You'd see Marketo come to Convergence, and then they'd miss WPC, and then they wouldn't come to Extreme or whatever. They just never really focused on it. And, they did very, very well. So good for them. I think they made the right choices. With Core Motives, it was different because people couldn't in the beginning understand, the differences between the two solutions. In fact, Core Motives was actually ahead of us, by a good 9 months. So they had more features in their solution and whatnot. And as I sort of mentioned earlier, that was a company that was started, by the technical co-founder of C360 that I worked with in C360. So I had spent, when I really was getting interested in marketing automation through the Pardot thing and all that, I'd spent, a lot of time. I think it was about 9 months trying to work with those guys, and they just didn't see the value in doing that, and it just never turned out. And so I ended up, getting my old band back together, and we were a hard band to beat.
Exactly.
So we ended up ultimately being the vendor that had the staying power, because we knew how to run a business, and not everybody does know how to run a business, even though they may be able to build a product. I think there's just a lot that goes into the sales and marketing and go to market that, people just don't think about, when there's just so much in the business end of it. But
I was reading somewhere recently that, about the difference between a product and a business, or the system to run a business. And in it, they were saying, they would ask people, do you think you could build a better hamburger than McDonald's? And most people would say, sure, I can build a better hamburger than McDonald's, but could you build a better business system than McDonald's? That's a totally different thing. And the whole thing was, it doesn't matter how good your product can be, if you don't get the business part of it right, nobody hears about it. Nobody knows about it. You're dead man standing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because Core Motives, they screamed out of the gate, and, they were sort of the talk of the town. And I remember the first trade show we did was Extreme in 2010, and we didn't even have a full product yet. Yeah. And so I showed up at Extreme, by myself with my sign and my little brochures spanned out on my table, and I had my whole station set up like 2 hours in advance, and I had a level, making sure the damn poster was, the sign was perfectly level. Yeah. And I remember those dudes, they rolled in like, at the very end, they almost didn't have time to set up. They ended up at the last booth in the corner, and in their mind, they'd kind of like we've made it, we're number one. And it's just like, from that point, I kind of thought, they're going to struggle when they see what we have going, especially when we started bringing the C360 team, Brad and Tony and, Lisa and those folks. I mean, and then when we got the Fargo group going, I mean, it just, it was tough to compete with that, I think, for those guys.
Fantastic. So I know you've read the book, The New Rules of Marketing and PR by David Scott and Walter Dixon. What's your take on the book, and how did you apply it, or did you apply it to your business?
Well, that was a long time ago. I'm assuming that book is being edited in new versions, but I read it back when I was at Scribe.
Yeah. Wow.
So that was back. I read it back. I guess it would have been 2009, and I remember I was at a conference with Scribe, and it must have been a non-Dynamics conference because they actually had David Meerman Scott there presenting, and so I got the CEO of Scribe and I think Peter Chase, the co-founder, and said, "Let's go watch this guy speak." And then I remember very clearly the number one thing we took out of his presentation was that, content marketing was a huge thing, and being sort of the center, I don't like the term thought leader, but whatever you want to call that, was huge. Yeah. And one of the things he recommended was to liberate your content, so not have, if you have a great white paper, well, just put it out there. Don't make everybody fill in a damn form to get it. Yeah. And so we changed our strategy on that with Scribe after that. And, we didn't as much with Click Dimensions because I felt like we really were the only place to go for valuable, information on Microsoft CRM marketing. So I felt like it was kind of, we didn't ask 50 questions of people when they filled out a form to download an ebook, but we were getting their identity because it was key to, being able to really sell to them, and it worked,
So when did you reach a tipping point with Click Dimensions? To the point that you knew, hey, this is a winner, and we're off type thing. There's always that grunt, getting your first 10, 20, 100 customers on the books, and you get to that point that you've got a sustainable business now, and you just got to keep feeding the engine, so to speak.
Well, I think the big thing in the beginning, there were a couple different, to answer your question, never, because there was always some threat out there. In the beginning, it was Core Motives. When we came into market, Core Motives' strategy was to really drop their pricing, and they thought they would just sort of wipe us out with that one move, and it turned out it actually wiped them out.
Yeah.
But at the time it happened, it was like, okay, this sucks. They shouldn't have done that. That's not good for them.
Yeah.
And we ended up just keeping with our pricing and just delivering better, so really when we finally put the nail in their coffin, which, I can't give you the exact date, but, there was an event where we just realized that, okay, they're irrelevant at this point.
Yeah.
That was sort of a point where we knew we were just going to run with it.
Yeah.
But no sooner did that happen than Microsoft bought Marketing Pilot, and we had to really see that play out. Some of the voices in Microsoft were, they were really threatening, saying, okay, you need to figure out what to do with your business. Like, we're about to, go Shaolin monkey on you. I mean, it was just, I can remember even sitting down with Kirill, just me and Kirill face to face, and Kirill's telling me about how much pressure I'm about to feel. And that kind of sucked, to have done as much as I felt I'd done for Microsoft. And I shouldn't say I mean, we, meaning me, Brad, Click Dimensions, and the whole team. And then all of a sudden you got this, super high up exec, who wasn't a bad guy, by the way. I actually like Kirill, but, he sat there and was telling me that, we're going to feel pressure, and, that pressure never came, and we actually came out better off. But, it's hard to not be a little intimidated sitting across, from a guy like Kirill, who, has a lot of power. It's like, shit, dude.
Totally.
Why don't you just write me a check and leave me alone?
Yeah. So true.
It's probably good that he didn't. So many things that happen in the business are probably good. Like, imagine if I'd work things out and worked with Core Motives. Maybe we'd have gotten bought when we were a lot smaller. Maybe the sales price would have been a lot lower. You just, you can't regret too much in your life. If it turns out well, you kind of got to look back and say, okay, it wasn't a straight line up.
Yep.
But some of those little, steps down maybe helped, the step ups be better. You just have to sort of take it as a whole.
Yeah, exactly. So from the outside looking in, I know that you had a great team, and you've mentioned a few of their names, at Click. So Matt, Brad, Corin, Chantel, Megan, are the few that came to mind for me. How did you create that formula of they were an onto it team? They had your DNA. You had a tremendous culture, if you like, within it. What were some of the ingredients that kind of created that team culture that you had in your business?
Well, I think I have to give just a ton of that credit to Brad and some of the early folks in the business, Tony and whatnot. Kim that hired a lot of the people in Fargo, and it's obviously I think a lot of times in business the guy or girl running the business gets an unproportional amount of the credit for the success of the business. That's just always the way it is. And I think we just had some really good hires early on, that sort of had the same mindset of, treating partners right, of, really looking to find the best person. We hated to fire people, you have to as a necessity of business, but, we knew that it was just so important to really do a thorough interview process and really get the right people and really, be patient even in times when we didn't want to be patient. But, so many people get the credit for all that.
Yeah.
But it's just sort of about figuring some things out. And I think a lot of the things that we figured out had been figured out a little bit in the C360 days. We had Lisa, we had Tony, we had Brad, back in the C360 days. And we sort of had developed a profile of an ideal salesperson.
Yeah.
And we just were able to extend that, into Click Dimensions. And then, we ended up, once we got some scale, we ended up bringing Alex Farquharson over from Customer Effective to really run support and and work with Matt, who'd done a great job. And so, Matt had, come on board and just changed the game for us as far as, how we, dealt with partners and how we dealt with support and things like that. But then, Alex coming on board allowed Matt to really focus on education and the different things. So we just, I don't know. I think a lot of it was relationships and just all these, relationships from years in the making. But there's a good bit of luck in that too.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah, just being around those good people.
Yeah, they're definitely a great team. So what's next for you?
Well, I have a non-compete until January 20th of 2018. So I haven't really thought about it. I do help companies, nobody that's competitive with Click Dimensions, of course, because there really is nobody competitive with Click Dimensions. So I do a lot of pro bono just with my ISV friends that just call up and I like that, enjoy that. People call me up and they say, oh, I'm having this issue and, with my marketing person or with this, that, or the other. And I just enjoy, it makes me feel like I'm giving a little something back to the folks that, help me get there. And I'd like to do more of it, but I haven't really, I haven't really tried to do anything operational, and I probably won't just because.
No, why would you? Have a break.
Yeah, exactly. There's it's more fun to help 3 or 4 companies than to get chained to one. So I don't, and playing that game with Microsoft, which is constant cat and mouse. And having won it twice, there's a temptation to go for the hat trick. There's a temptation to say, well, I'm the man, I can do it 3 times. But, I look back at both those situations. I say, well, it wasn't all me. And of course it was, very little of me. And there was some luck in this. And then do I really want to, gamble again and, put myself through all that? And the answer is, at least right now, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So as we wrap up, I've got a few quick fire questions for you. What book do you recommend most to people and why?
Yeah, I love reading adventure stories, totally only nonfiction, but, the book I always rave about is written by a guy named Joshua Slocum, who sailed around the world by himself. Back from 1895 to 1898. I mean, the balls on this guy must have been just huge. I mean, he did something that was basically, it was like committing suicide. And he was super chill. Like, he'd run into natives that were trying to steal from him or kill him. Yeah. He dealt with it. He would set up his sailboat so they could just sort of go on its own, and he would be down below sleeping while it's just trucking through the Pacific. I mean, just the guy was crazy. And I like reading about people like that, even though it's not technically a business book.
No.
It just shows you about the human spirit and people, what they can do when they take risk.
Fantastic.
It's just a really neat book.
Fantastic. Yeah. Good. What's your favorite app and why?
Favorite apps. Well, I'm a traveler, so I love Airbnb. I'm all in on Airbnb.
I'm sitting in one right now.
Yeah, I think it's the best, man. Yeah. If I could have started any company on the planet, I think that would have been it. So I'm into that. I'm into the as simple as it may sound, Google Maps. Like when you're in, I was just in Edinburgh, Scotland, and just Google Maps tells you, which train to take, what time. I mean, just the navigation, not just for driving, but for that's great. And then just, one of the apps I use the most is just the Notes app on my iPhone. I mean, it's everything from preparing for this interview to logging my fishing spots I do on Notes. So, I love that. Now the big thing, as you've probably seen in Europe, is everybody has Apple Pay. Yep. That's awesome. That's the best. You can go up to a vending machine and buy a Snickers bar by tapping your phone on it. We're so behind here in the United States, but Europe, they're just so smart over there. But I love how they've adopted that.
Yeah, so true. The latest one I've started using quite a bit is My Taxi, because it's like Uber, but it's for taxi companies, and you can see when the cab's arriving. You don't have to speak their language. language and connect it to your credit card, and it just works. It's fantastic. And I've only come across it in Europe. Yeah.
Oh, it's only in Europe. Okay, well, that's
I don't know if it is. I've only come across it, as in I was first in Madrid and somebody there put me onto it, and I've since used it in Ireland, Italy, Germany, Switzerland. Fantastic app.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So
cool,
do you have any daily rituals that set you on the right path for a successful day? Things you kind of like set your day up right?
I do something physical every day, like whether I go to the gym and lift weights, or whether I walk the golf course, or whether I jump in and shoot fish, or ride my bike. I do something every day.
Brilliant.
That's my daily ritual. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations for people wanting to start a career in Dynamics?
Don't. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know, man. I think they're onto something. I think what they're doing is really good. They have AppSource now. They got rid of this ridiculous concept of business versus enterprise edition, which I think is really smart.
Brilliant.
I think they're in a position where they can be successful. I just don't know that I would be advising somebody to start something horizontal like I've done, because I think maybe the opportunity for that is not quite there as much, as it was.
Yeah, I agree.
I think I'd do it vertically.
Yeah. If you could redo anything in your career, what would it be?
Like all of us, we have to work for money. And, I think a lot of what I did was, trying to, the end objective was trying to reach financial security, which is lovely to have for sure. Mm-hmm. But, I can't say that starting add-on businesses probably gives you the same feeling that Elon Musk has, who's changing the world.
Yeah.
So, I think what I'll think about for what I do next is, I'd like to do something that, can have a different type of impact. I'm not saying that Click Dimensions doesn't have an impact, or Century60 didn't, but it's different than, than somebody who's, doing something that helps people, or, in a more meaningful way.
Brilliant. Good. John, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Before you go, if people want to follow you online, where can they find you?
I'm not doing anything social these days. I'm not posting. I have a Twitter account, John Gravely, but I don't really put anything out there. I'm kind of gone into hermit mode a little bit lately. I'm underwater shooting fish.
This has been a Dynamics 365 podcast focusing on the ingredients of a successful Dynamics 365 practice. Your host was Business Solution MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as NZ365 Guy. For more information on this interview, show notes, feedback, and resources mentioned, or if you know someone who would be a great guest for future episodes, please go to nz365guy.com/podcast. Thanks to Maplytics for sponsoring the Dynamics 365 Practice Podcast.